Jer si milostivi čovekoljubiv Bog i tebi slavu uznosimo, Otcu i Sinu i Svetome Duhu, sada i u vekove vekova.
In a world of shadows and secrets untold, where primeval stories make the brave go cold, mighty gods on high and realms below, whispers of legends that shape each soul. And nightmarish dreams, cryptids lurking, nothing's as it seems, giants walking, angels and demons fight, only truth can bring the light. Through the echoes of time, the tales unfold, mysteries arise as the prophecies are foretold, from valiant knights to buried treasure, this podcast brings nothing but pleasure. Welcome to mysteries and majesty. Study with us, don't be a travesty. Theology, mythology, fantasy and horror, Dungeons and Dragons to Skyrim and Mordor. And Mordor, powers haunt the evening, in gothic castles where they're screaming, wizards cast spells in their towers tonight, exploiting enigmas hidden from our sight. Archaeologists make excavations deep on the ancient tombs where pharaohs sleep. In the dust of ages we chronicles keep, storytelling's power of monsters that creep. Mysteries and majesty is the place for you to learn about this haunted space. From scholarship to manuscripts of old, unlock the secrets of wisdom and gold.
What do you do when you're a person of faith that is always called to speak the truth? And besides studying the scriptures, you're also very curious and trying to be intellectually, just your mind is going everywhere. And then you collect data. Sometimes that data and those sources go contrary to some of your church friends and religious people that will be talking the opposite. So what do you do in that moment? Well, then you start a podcast like I did, and you invite another a podcaster friends so that they can join you and talk about topics that are so prevalent and important in the pop culture in 2025. Welcome to episode 170, where we'll be discussing about a few different topics where we are merging science and faith. Namely, we'll be talking about human and ape DNA when it comes to the latest scientific research. Mind you, it's not as close as they used to tell us that it is. And then we'll be covering shortly moon landing. And if the Earth is globe or it's actually flat, we'll be actually listening to eyewitness testimonies of some of the Christian astronauts, because usually religious people and non-religious people have been telling us for years and decades that NASA and they have been lying to us. Well, we'll be hearing from people who fear and love God why they actually saw. So we're not dealing with any government or NASA sources. Will be dealing directly with Christian sources. We'll be actually watching and commenting a couple of videos, and for that purpose, I'm welcoming Dain back on the podcast. Dain, thank you so much for finding time for the audience and myself. Can you please tell us how are your master's studies going is it biblical studies?
Yeah, it's a master's degree in biblical studies from Redemption Seminary. And I'm on my last class right now. I'll graduate in August 19th. And after that, I'll be launching my research organization. It's an ancient studies research organization called Sanctum Prisca Fide, which means the sanctuary of ancient faith. And it's dedicated to studying ancient Near Eastern religions in their context. So it's essentially biblical theology, the first step in biblical theology. But yeah, I'm working on that, and I'll be glad to be done because I started in 2020. So it's been like 5 years, and I'm kind of done. I just want to be done.
Yeah, I remember 2 years ago when I was done with just my bachelor's at Moody and doing for 4.5 years full-time studies and full-time work. It was killing me. I loved it, but I couldn't wait to be done. And once I was done, it was almost that prisoner mentality. You leave the prison and you're like, you still don't know if you're free. So when I went Moody, I'm like, wait. I'm like, it's like your brain cannot live with it like immediately. You need time to forget. Like I don't have 11:59 p.m. deadlines. I don't have class in the morning. I don't have exams. I don't have to memorize like so many books. I don't have to write research papers. It's like so weird. It's like you're being grinded for 4 or 5 years and suddenly like, oh, it's like wait. It's almost like coming out of trauma. I'm not saying it's trauma. I'm just saying it was like a specific lifestyle, and then boom, like suddenly you're done. You're like, seriously? It's like, boy, I need time to adjust to that. So I'm happy for you, and I didn't know about this coming project. I'm excited for you. So when you start with that, type of research ministry or research project, please keep us in the loop. What's happening? That will be amazing. And I'm getting excited. I want to learn more. So maybe you can share that with me when we go. When we go offline. But Dain, when it comes is the very beginning of this episode. When it comes to this overall topic, when it comes to the human and versus ape DNA, moon landing, and globe versus flat Earth. So of course we'll be, these topics are both addressed by skeptics and religious people. But when it comes to religious people, I think that both you and I witnessed, especially on the social media in the last several years, so many people that unless you would agree with them that the Earth must be flat, or we never left, the planet, the moon landing never happened, or whatever, like you'll be considered almost as a heretic or someone who doesn't take faith seriously. So why is this topic important when it comes to moon landing and global versus flat Earth? And on the other side, why do you think it will be important for us to tell the people about the latest scientific research where the actual difference between human and ape DNA is much bigger than they actually thought? How do you perceive the importance of this episode for tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think this type of thing is very important to the study of the Bible because, and not everyone's going to agree with this, right? But one of the things I used to think is that the Bible was speaking directly to scientific reality in our time. And I've come to understand and believe that the Bible, as John Walton would say, was written for us, but not to us. And so the ancient people, when they were writing the Bible, some of them had a flat earth cosmology. And so they believed the earth was flat. God worked with that. It's called divine accommodation. And he accommodated to their belief system in order to communicate a theological message that he wanted them to know. The Bible was not written as a science book to communicate science. There might be science in there, but ancient peoples didn't have a scientific worldview at all. They didn't know about the things that we know about through the scientific method that came, much later in a different phase of history. So I think it's really important that we understand, what we can't bring the Bible in to we can't just read it and think we know what it's saying and then just apply it to our modern outlook, because it's a certain type of literature set in a certain time in history. It has different genre throughout the Bible depending on where you're at, different purpose, different people, and different historical setting. So yeah, it's much more complex than just, oh, it says here that the pillars of the earth. Well, it must be a flat earth. You just can't do that and have it be a sound conclusion, in my opinion. I understand and don't blame people that think that way, because you don't know. I didn't know before I started educating myself. I didn't know about the proper way to engage historical documents. But after learning that, it makes a lot of sense. It makes more sense to me than just reading it and coming to whatever conclusion based on my worldview, my current worldview as a modern person. So what was the second question you asked?
Well, when it comes to also a globe, well, you covered that. When it comes to moon landing and all these conspiracies, sometimes even come from Christians. I don't know why they are hiding from us. They're lying to us. Like, who are they? NASA? Like, why? Okay, why are they lying to you? And also the difference between the ape and human DNA that is actually not that big.
Yeah, when it
No,
comes
actually,
to
that is big, but the difference is bigger between us and the chimpanzees that we actually.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, science is always changing. The more we discover and the more we learn, which is another reason I think why we shouldn't fuse the biblical text with the current scientific understanding, because, and that's the mistake we've made over and over again in the scientific era as Christians, is we read something, we kind of connect science to that passage, and then science changes, and now we're in a pickle. We have to try to explain that. Instead, it's better to realize what the Bible is and what it isn't, and and realize what science is and what science isn't. And we're trying to explain reality, and these are two different ways of looking at it. The Bible is God's word, and it has a different reasons for why it was written to explain our reality. Then science is, the revelation, the general revelation through nature, not the special revelation through Scripture. So God tells us a lot of things through nature, which science we can use that to measure and understand and uncover. But it's two different things, and they don't necessarily always align, because the Bible isn't always going to speak to every detail that we discover in the general revelation. And it's a mistake to try to fuse those together, and, unless it actually works. You just have to be very careful about how you do that. The other thing with the moon landing, as I popped my camera off, and I just bought this book here. I don't know if it's backwards on the camera. It's called Moon Hoax Debunked. And it's one of the best. I haven't read it yet, but I was doing some research, and it seemed like a good one that advocates for the fact that the moon landing was real. And my wife and I argue about this all the time. She thinks that possibly she's more on the side of it was a hoax. I'm more on the side of I think it happened, but I do think that the media, you got to remember, when it happened, we were in a Cold War. We were in the race against Eastern Europe. There were reasons for us to do certain things, certain PR campaigns. Maybe it happened, but maybe the video was in a studio. It's not that it didn't happen, because science, I think, proves that it did happen. But maybe there was some propaganda that was faked in history in order, as a part of a Cold War that we were in, and maybe that's why certain things, I don't know, I haven't looked into it deep, but I just know too, from being involved in politics a little bit, that boy, there's a lot of deception that happens. And after living through this last 5 years from the start of the pandemic in 2020, whether you agree with this or not, there's a lot of things that were conspiracy theories that were true. And so I do think that there's a lot of propaganda that happens. There's a lot of deception that happens to try and control public opinion towards making certain decisions or accepting certain things that they want you to accept. They, we always talk about they, who's they, but I think they is all different types of people and groups, and at all different levels of power, and all from your local politicians or business owners all the way up to, national and whatnot, or global people. So it's much more complex than just they faked the moon landing, like people always want to make conspiracies so simple. And I think there can be a lot of truth, but it's always more complex than just, the statements that you hear. Yeah. So anyways, that's kind of my take on it. I'm not someone who's like never believed conspiracy theories, but I'm also someone who is like, well, you have to be kind of careful. You have to critically analyze everything. I believe that all information you should be able to critically analyze. I don't accept anything anyone tells me at face value. I'm always skeptic, but I'm also able to hold up ideas that I don't necessarily agree with and just look at them, analyze them, and decide, is this true or not? And there's a lot of things I haven't decided if they're true or not, but I hold them loosely and I might have an opinion one way or the other. But I'm not sure. And that's life. I mean, I think it's good to realize that and be critical of information. So.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think your wife will be challenged by the second video we'll be playing. Well, we'll actually see some footage and eyewitness testimonies of Christian astronomers who actually walked on the moon.
Oh,
so I think
nice.
that will be very fun for her. But let's first deal with the first segment that deals with evolution, with human DNA, ape DNA, and the latest discovery made in the scientific world that should excite all the Christians.
Are researchers hiding the truth?
Welcome to Answers News, Tuesday, May 27th, 2025.
In today's top story, researchers have found that humans and chimps aren't quite as closely related as we thought they were. So I'm Roger Patterson, hosting today alongside Brian Osborne and Avery Foley. And we're going to talk about this bombshell new research that overturns the claim that humans and chimps differ only by 1% when we compare their DNA. This is a very popular claim made by evolutionists that humans and chimps, which supposedly in their worldview share a common ancestor. Now, this often gets misstated as apes and humans are, since humans are apes in the evolutionary view and apes still exist today, how could we come from a common ancestor? But that's not the claim of the evolutionists. They say we share a common ancestor, not that we evolved from modern apes. So get that clear as we're talking through this. That's a key point we want to understand. But as a ministry and others working with us, we've heard this claim over and over and over. And regardless of what the percentage of DNA says, there's a key difference that we'll get to when we think about who people are. But this new study was released in the journal Nature, and it looks at a reworking of the framework for understanding the entire ape genome. In fact, that's the blasé title of the article that got released. And in the past, when they made these frameworks, they assumed that evolutionary relationship. So the chimp and ape DNA frameworks were based on what the human framework was. So it's like building the scaffolding for humans and knowing what that is, and then pretending in the evolutionary view, the chimps just fit right over the top of that. So that's where we're parsing out some of these details today as we get to a new number. So after today, you can no longer say, even if you're an evolutionist, that chimps and humans are 1% to 2% different in their DNA.
And even if it was just the 1% or 2%, that would make a huge difference. I mean, you go to a zoo today, go visit the apes, go visit a chimp, go visit a gorilla, and you can tell there's a lot of difference between us and them. And so there's usually glass protecting you from them for a reason.
Big fence.
And also know we are writing about them. We're researching this stuff about us and them because we're made in God's image. They don't write papers about us. We write papers about them because we were made very much differently from them. Yeah. We are made in God's image.
Mm-hmm. Now, for a long time, like Roger was saying, we've heard this claim over and over and over again. You'll see people wearing T-shirts that proclaim this, different museum exhibits. Even when Ken Ham and Bill Nye had their debate here at the Creation Museum back in 2014, and Bill Nye ended up writing a book, he quoted that statistic and was like, hey, this basically proves evolution right here. This article refers to it as an icon of evolution for a really long time, that humans and chimpanzees share this similarity. But creationist scientists have been doing their own research on this and have been saying for years that is not accurate. That only represents small parts of the genome. It does not represent the entire genome. And now when evolutionists are actually mapping out the entire genome, not using the human genome as a reference, but actually doing observational science and mapping out these genomes of these different ape species, what they're finding is actually that statistic isn't accurate. There are vast differences, genetically speaking, between humans, chimpanzees, and other apes, which isn't very shocking to us whatsoever. Just confirms what we'd expect.
Yeah, and that's why this fact check new complete chimp genome shows 14.9% difference from human genome. That's the
14.9 for the non-math people is a lot more than 1 to 2.
And it could even be higher than that. Yeah. So scientists within the Young Earth community have been talking about this for a long time. Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins has done lots of research in this area, even using the old structure and the aligned sections. Basically, it says if we line up the chimp DNA with the human DNA, like you see in this image, we can tell the number of differences there. But remember, it was based on that false framework in the starting point, and they left out all the other stuff. They just looked at those aligned regions and ignored all the rest. And so the number was very, very, very small. So what Dr. Tompkins and others did is examined the whole genome, even the old version, and got those numbers in the 80 to 85% range that's being reported here. But there's even more issues with this.
Wait.
We start.
Okay, I'll stop here for now and then we'll continue. Okay, what is mind-blowing first is that scientists, I mean, it took them decades to come to the proper number. Like, I'm a little bit disappointed in the scientific community that it took them this long to come up with the proper number, that the differences between our DNA and chimp or ape DNA would be 15%. That's a much bigger difference than 1 or 2%. That's a big difference. I would say that I'm disappointed it took them so long for them to realize in 2025, oh, it's a much bigger difference. Second thing, I love how maybe 5-10 minutes ago they said, but you can tell the difference between apes and us, because it is us who write papers about them, not vice versa. It's
that was good.
us who experiment. It's about us who are discovering things. It's about us who are trying to understand the reality in the scientific world, not them. And this is not, of course, to say it in arrogance, but this is basically to go back to the scriptures and say, well, we've been knowing this from the beginning. Again, it's not a matter of pride, but because we're made in God's image. We are made as the crown of creation, which is not actually a biblical line I can quote, but it's actually being said so often throughout centuries that it is true. God made us as the crown of His creation. That He made us as at the end of His creation as something so special that He will bestow governance upon someone like us to go and deal with creatures and have dominion over them, but of course not to abuse them, as we see so often nowadays, where people are abusing other people are abusing animals, people are abusing the land, people are abusing the ecosystem, people are exploiting without any regrets because of the profit, because of selfishness and all of these things. So putting that on aside, if God created man to with a special purpose to imitate Him, to be His image walkers, image makers, image bearers, right? And now with that image bearers, you go and you try to be God's ambassador. You try to do what He made you to do. It's not a matter of pride. It's not a matter of even trying to boast. You have to say that in modesty, in humility, because you didn't do anything to deserve that. But it was God, out of His love, to share His splendor and His majesty and His magnificence of creation, decided to share that love and relationship with us. So when He made us, He gave us this task of having creation under our dominion. But why? To use it for good. So I love, again, when they're saying how it's a big difference, because regardless of the number of the difference in DNA, we've been knowing since the very beginning that God made us with special purpose. And let's say, hypothetically speaking, that the difference between us and pigs or us and chimps could be 0.5. Yes, that would seem like almost the same. But if you would actually honestly check the differences between animals and us, regardless of their beauty, regardless of their intellect, you can tell that humanity is made for a higher purpose. They're made way above anyone else. And again, it's not a matter of pride or to abuse anyone who is weaker or smaller than you, right? So for me, I was like, yeah, thank God that regardless of this beautiful scientific branch that, where we can study genetics and we can study human genome, regardless of that, we've been knowing for a long time who we are. And now science is finally catching up in 2025, saying, wait. I'm sorry, we made a mistake. It's not 1.5 or 2% that we're sharing with apes. It's actually 15%. Now, if the DNA is a letter, as a divine complex letter, has I don't know how many billions of letters, 15% is a lot. Take any computer coder and tell him, hey, you can just make, one mistake in a line when you're coding, when when you're making a program, when you're making a website. Take 15% of that. That thing will not work. That thing will not work. And go to someone and say, hey, try to give your best and try to make as perfect as you can your website or a code program. You will see the difference how one is functioning over the other. Even if the former thing with so many mistakes functions, it will not operate as the one that is perfected. So this is what I'm getting from the beginning of this video. What are your thoughts?
Wow, I have a lot of thoughts, and I don't want to bore everyone by getting too into it, but essentially this kind of comes back in my mind to, again, this idea of, are we exploring science, for in its own category, or are we trying to use science to prove the Bible's true, which I think is a mistake. So, like, for example, take the image of God. We know from Dr. Carmen Imes' research, and Dr. Heiser cited it, that the image of God is a status first and foremost, not an ontological. Well, I guess it is ontological in the sense that by being human, our status is image bearers of God. What does image bearers of God mean? It means we reflect God to the rest of creation. Our purpose is to be God's representative, and to sort of replicate the functions that he does, being creative, building, making things more perfect, more beautiful. That's our purpose. And I think it is important to be careful about saying, theologically anyways, saying things like any of our capability as humans, like we can read, we can write the papers, the monkeys can't write the papers, right? That tells me intelligence is an attribute of being God's image bearer. But you get into problems with that when you think about unborn babies, severely handicapped individuals. So they're not God's image bearers then, because they can't write papers. So I think that we got to really be careful about that. And yes, on the other flip side of that, maybe that idea is general. In other words, in general, humans are created to be higher than all the rest of the animals. We can write papers. Chimps can't. In general, you're going to have people that can't. You're going to have unborn babies that can't. You're going to have disabled people that can't. But in general, the intent was that humans are created as such. So you get into a lot of really, how do I want to say it, tangly things when you start to go down the path of how our capabilities as humans versus animals is what makes us God's image bearer or not, so that's one point I had. Another point I had was I chat GPT'd it as you were talking, and not that chat GPT is the legit place to go for everything, but we share 85% DNA with mice, 60% with fruit flies, about 40 to 50% with cabbage or bananas. So all created things have a certain share of DNA, and I think it's good that they discovered that we're not as close to chimps as, because it weakens the argument that secular people say that, well, we're actually descended from monkeys or whatever. But again, I think that's their faulty argumentation, and we've stepped into that as Christians. It goes back to the whole Scopes trial thing with the monkey and evolution and stuff, and fundamentalist Christianity pulling back from analysis of data and not understanding how to categorize science versus theology and mixing the two. And then the fundamentalists stepped back and they started to say, no, science is bad. Let's not engage with the academy at all. They're out to get us. You know, just because they couldn't reconcile the science at the time with the Bible. So then they made up, or they read into the Bible in a wrong way and ignored the scientific data. You know, all these scientists, most of them are doing, they're legit, you know, they know what they're doing. So I think that's a mistake. The other thing too is to acknowledge, I think science is captured to a degree by wealthy interests that have a stake in certain outcomes. And it depends on what part of the science you're talking about. But for example, let's just say the research papers, you know, a lot of research papers into the mRNA vaccines were kicked back, and later it came to light that they were inappropriately banned or kicked back when it was good science asking good questions. And it was because of all the money tie-ins with big pharma and all this power that was involved in science. And so science has been to a certain degree captured, and this includes the Biblical Studies Academy, captured by certain interests that have lots of money and power and want certain types of outcomes versus others. And that's a true thing. I think it's important we acknowledge that's a true thing. Science is not infallible. Like I said, it changes over time. Just because there's a study, you can trust that peer-reviewed study, you can trust it, let's say 99%, 98%, but you still shouldn't totally hang your hat on anything, right? I mean, there could be mistakes, there could be willful deception. You know, I've ran into all of this stuff, and I just think that you got to be careful about that. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of the comments I would have about it. It is interesting, and it's good to a certain degree. But, you know, listening to these guys talk, I'm a little bit like they're making the mistake that we've made for a long time, which is they're trying to have science validate the biblical text without necessarily understanding that there are different ways of looking at this, that we don't have to merge science with the text to say the text is authoritative or true. And, you know, I got sick at the last minute, so I didn't get to come on with you and Carrie with the Swami Das discussions. But Swami Das is a good example of that, whether he's right or wrong. It's a theory. It's not been proven, you know, what he advocates for. But he's saying that God basically took a certain human and separated them out and made them the chosen one, or created a certain human separate from, but identically DNA similar to the other humans on the planet who evolved from the apes. And the reason that works is because it's not about creation, isn't in the Bible, isn't necessarily always about material creation. It's about God assigning function and purpose. You know, it's a similar with the image status thing. That being made in the image of God is a status. We have a purpose to reflect God. Doesn't necessarily mean material attributes of our intelligence or capabilities. And so I think there's a lot of merit in that. I didn't know about that until I started listening to Heiser. And while I'm not 100% like, yes, this is absolutely the way we should think about it, my eyes have been open to that as a real possibility now at this point. And I see these guys, I like what they're doing and everything, but I feel like they're kind of making the same mistake that we've made for a long time, that fundamentalists have made for a long time, which is trying to use science to prove the Bible's true. And it's kind of like we're falling into this trap that we don't need to fall into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know their hearts. This is from the Answers in Genesis ministry. The whole team is based on Christian scientists, so I think it's on their hearts yeah, maybe to reconcile science in the Bible, but also to help so many skeptics who have
Hmm.
questions or texts on the Bible, as well as Christians who may be on the verge of losing faith, or don't know how to reconcile certain things, and they need help, and their parents or their local pastor is not simply equipped. So when it comes to that regard, I really appreciate their ministry, even though I don't listen to them very often. I don't adhere to the earth necessarily being 6,000 years old, so I don't usually listen to those topics. For me, I don't know how old is the earth, and for me that topic is open. Jesus will have to tell us one day. But for a
Yeah.
lot of other stuff, for me that occasionally watches them, I learn from these people
Oh, for
because
sure.
there are brothers and they know much more than me. I love science, but I don't know. I don't know, for example, too much about genetics. For me, I
Same.
like
I'm not a
more.
science kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, I like
Yep.
more astronomy. I like more stars, universe. That's more on my thing. But I still
Mm.
find this fascinating because they can. I
Oh, yeah.
think this data and this argument can be used gently, not in aggressive way, by Christians, especially apologists in the future. Well, even now, to say, to atheists who claim, well, if we're so special, how come we're so close? And people can actually say, hey, just a second, that's old data. We
Mhm.
have new data. So in that
Yeah.
regard, I appreciate what they're doing, because otherwise I wouldn't have learned. Well, eventually probably I would have heard about this news, but I heard it first from them. So I was like, oh wow, this would be actually interesting. Like you said, there's no reason for us to go back and try to reconcile everything with between science and the Bible, but at least when it comes to the origin, I thought this would be very important for people who have questions and doubts, and like I think this should strengthen their faith.
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about that. Like, I agree. Like, on one hand, I totally agree, because if an atheist is making an argument that on faulty data, now we have new data. So actually, to be able to say back to that person, well, actually, your argument's based on data that isn't even true anymore. So first, let's make sure we're talking about what's true and not true with the data. But the reason I have mixed feelings is because what's our conclusion based on that data? Are they saying, uh, are they saying, see, this proves that we didn't evolve from evolution, which I think is, and let's say a person whose faith is being weakened by let's say they're in college and they learned about evolution, and they're trying to reconcile and they can't, and then they come along and they hear this argument, and they're like, yeah, okay, that gives me an answer. My faith has been strengthened. But then later there's other information that comes that contradicts that, and their faith that was strong becomes destroyed or has gotten weaker because it was hung on scientific evidence trying to prove what the Bible says. Not that isn't good to explore, but for me, it was such a relief when I started to realize that I didn't have to have the Bible be proved by science in order to believe what it was saying, because it was never trying to say that in the first place. And actually, I feel much more strong now in the fact that I don't have to care of whether science proves it or doesn't prove it, because that's never was why it was written. That's not even what the Bible's saying. It's saying something completely different. And in the context of which it was written, those people weren't even thinking about, they didn't know about DNA and things like that. So that's my mixed feelings. Like, I think it's good to explore, you know what I mean? Like, it's fascinating. It's very interesting. But where I don't like where it goes is when they kind of cross the line into, and so see, evolution is false. I mean, well, there's a lot more to consider than that. And what if science changes later, and now you've built up your whole theology around the science proves the Bible, when the Bible as a piece of literature was never trying to give modern people a secret message about our material world. It was giving a theological message to ancient people, and that's the message we should try to recover, and that's what we should base our theology on, and our hope and our faith on. not, science proves the Bible. So I don't want to dog it and say it's bad, because it is fascinating and good, and I think it has a purpose too. With, as you mentioned, the atheist is trying to make an argument that, well, we share DNA and it's only 1% different. No, buddy, it's 15% different. So, that's actually not true, first of all. So it does introduce doubt into a confident atheist, which I think is good, because it'll break down that confidence a little bit and get us questioning. And it goes along with being dogmatic. I mean, I used to be so dogmatic, meaning, this theology is true. Let's just take young earth. You mentioned young earth before. I used to be a young earth guy. I'm not a young earth guy anymore. I still hold a little bit of it could be, but basically I've been pretty much convinced old earth is probably the way to go. And really what did it for me was, as soon as I understood that the earth didn't have to be young in order for the Bible to be true, I just relaxed about it all and just realized that, okay, I don't have to hang my hat on this for my faith. And now that the arguments I'm hearing, it really just seems like it's probably old earth, but it really doesn't matter that much to me. Instead of being like, it's gotta be 6,000 years, otherwise the faith is destroyed, like if you're too dogmatic, and then you're like, they call it in Calvinist circles, they call it your cage stage Calvinist, where like you're so rabid and you're so angry about everything, they have to put you in a cage,
And make sure you quote it from KJV, right?
Yeah, make sure you quote from KJV, because that is the one that God blessed, the KJV version. No. So I mean, I guess that's my thoughts around this. Is I see the Answers in Genesis group, which I used to follow a lot. I used to listen to their stuff all the time, and it's good. They do a lot of really interesting stuff, but I think it's that line they cross where they kind of go, and see, this science proves the Bible is true. And it's like, let's not even go there, because when we go there, we get ourselves into all kinds of trouble and heated sort of conversations and fights that don't even need to happen. And the Bible wasn't even written for. So I think it's also like your philosophy of hermeneutics and stuff too. It's, what do you think the Bible is really saying? Is God mysteriously communicating a modern message to us, even though the original message in context didn't mean that? But he's communicating, I forget the name for it. There's a Latin name for that. Do you remember what it is? I forget it just now, but there's a name for when people believe that the Bible, there's a meaning in the text that transcends the original meaning. And then we can start pulling out things like, oh, the Bible is addressing us. It's talking about the science that the earth is a globe. It's talking about, whatever it is. And that's not even there in the text at all. Like if you were to go look at the text and try to recover the meaning in context of the text, it's not saying that at all. But you just believe that God has a message that transcends it. That's one philosophy. And I used to think that. I no longer think that.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Before we continue, well, first I want to say something, the same thing that you said about science. You don't need science to prove the Bible or to confirm the Bible. I remember when I was talking with one of the Christian archaeologists, Dr. David Graves. He told me, he corrected me. He says, archaeology doesn't prove the Bible. Archaeology supports the Bible. The Bible doesn't need to be proven by archaeology. So I think you're saying something very similar. The Bible doesn't need to be proven by science. The Bible, we have different measures of determining the truth, the accuracy of the Bible or not. But science supports the Bible. So I'm like, okay, basically what you're saying resonates with Dr. David Graves told me about archaeology. And I have a brief question so that we can continue because this is still the first video. The question that because you're saying that now you don't even think so much about science, reconciling the science and the Bible, and you understand the Bible written from the ancient perspective does not even address many scientific points. Fair enough. But what if it wasn't science? or scientific data, what led you to change your mind that the Earth is most probably not 6,000 years old, but older? What changed you if you put science and scientific data? Was it the Bible itself that made you help you change that worldview?
No, I would say the most fun, and I can't remember all of the different facts because I haven't thought about that in a while, but I did look into it a little bit and was kind of convinced mostly. But I think really what it came down to was once I understood that the earth didn't need to be 6,000 years old for the Bible to be true, I relaxed and realized that there's all the science out there that says it's much, much, much older. And all of these scientists, you know, these are their careers. This is verifiable empirical data that they're basing their conclusions on about the age of the earth. Yes, there might be some conspiracies. Yes, there might be some powerful individuals that try and skew data for different reasons. But basically, I think just the science is probably right in the fact that the earth is old. It just makes common sense to me. Geologists, people go to school for this, base their entire careers on this. And so I'm just kind of like going off of that sort of feeling. I think that, and just knowing that the way the Bible was written was, once I understood what interpreting the Bible within its ancient context meant, all sorts of things started to click into place for me. Because I started to see the Bible differently as a piece of literature, ancient literature, instead of this supernatural manual for life. And that might sound like heretical or bad to some people, but I really believe like the Bible speaks to certain things, but there's a lot of things it doesn't speak to because it was written by ancient people to other ancient people for specific reasons, and it wasn't written to us in that way. Yes, we believe God supernaturally guided those people to write it, and there's a theological message in there that that does apply to us, that's for us, but we have to know how to appropriately treat that information in the text. We can't just, like let's say the creation days, there's a lot about the creation sequence that doesn't make sense as far as the order of it goes and things like that. Like plants were there before the sun, stuff like that, if you take the literal view. But once you realize how other ancient literature functions, and you realize the Bible was written in that same milieu, you start to understand that, oh no, that's not even how the Bible works. That's not what it is. So why am I trying so hard to make it be something that serves me in my modern life, instead of like respecting what it is in its ancient context and then looking at it and saying, what can I learn from this and apply to my life? Because I do believe there is a God, and I do believe that there's a message for me in this ancient text. Does that make sense? I mean, I know you know this. I'm just saying, like, does my am I making sense based on what you asked me?
The reason why I asked you about what led you to change your mind about the age of the earth, and I'm glad that beside the scriptures that you mentioned science, because I don't want people to think, based on your previous comment on these people and the whole organization, Answers in Genesis, trying to use science to support or prove the Bible. I don't want them to think that you are against us, trying to, learn from science or use the science as a powerful tool, right. Apologetics. Right. That's why I wanted to ask you, was it also science? And I'm glad that you confirmed, so that the audience wouldn't assume that you're actually speaking against science or Christians doing science, because that's not what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I totally think science is obviously very, very important. And, we just have to realize like what science is and what it's not. And that's the other thing. I mean, look at what they did to science in the last 5 years. They took science, which at its fundamental level is about questioning reality and trying to find answers based on the evidence and reality. And they reduced it down to the science that we're all just supposed to accept as gospel. I'm talking about the public health
That
apparatus.
says the science.
The science. It's like, no, the science is, maybe it's the consensus of the experts, but number one, to realize not all the experts are agreeing. Number two, you should never shut down inquiry. Never, never, never. And that's why I say, like, I respect the scientific method and I know we can learn from that. But what I'm saying is, like, Christians are kind of doing the same thing in reverse sometimes by saying, well, we're using science to prove that the Bible's true. And, because we're able to do that, now you have to accept the 6,000, young earth worldview or something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, we just need to have a much more open mind and a critical mind, I think. We need to change the way we think about data and information and question everything and hold convictions a little bit more loose. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have convictions. We absolutely should when we're convinced, when we're truly convinced about something. We should, and the faith has core tenets and there's a reason things are called heresy, and I think legitimately. But we need to be very critical of information and hold things a little bit more loosely than I have in the past. Like I said, I used to be really dogmatic. I'm not that way anymore. So it's kind of like, but at the same time, I don't want to say, like, there's value in scientific investigation, like what they're doing here. And there's value in being a really intelligent Christian who knows this stuff, because you do get into these scientific debates and it's not very convincing to a secular person to just say, well, the Bible wasn't written for that. It's not a science book, and end of story. So then that person, what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh, well, then I'll just continue not to believe it because, I'm a scientific materialistic person. To me, everything has to be proven. And so if the Bible is not written as a science book, then I'm just going to continue to discard it because I'm not interested. So there's value in trying to, it's no different than like philosophical apologetics, where you're trying to prove the existence of God based on philosophical concepts. To me, that was very helpful in my Christian walk. Like, it was the first person I ran to was Lee Strobel, Case for Christ. And some of the things, even though now I think he was wrong about some of the stuff, but it was some of the philosophical arguments that he made that made me realize, yeah, God is real. There is a God. Like, there's no getting around it, So I think there's that same value here. You just have to be careful not to cross the line of, see, we're 15% different from apes, and that proves that we didn't evolve from apes. Well, it's more complicated than that. Yep.
Okay, let's continue because we're spending so much time on this short segment. So
I don't shut up. I'm a talker.
But when you talk about that number of 15%, I think that gets lost on us. That's at least 400 million differences in the DNA.
That's not that many.
I know, right? Just changing a few could be detrimental to the creature's health. And so this is a really big problem for the evolutionists. And it's interesting, the author of this article actually recognizes that as they are revealing this research, this should be huge news. This is changing a lot of what they should be thinking about evolution from 1 to 15%, yet they bury the lead in the article. They hardly even talk about it. It's like they're trying to almost
dig into the
cover it up.
supplemental data to find the numbers.
You really do.
Yeah, so when you analyze the data like this, you can see the different ape species listed out here. Now, of course, they think humans are just hairless apes, but that's not where we have to land as biblical creationists, people who trust the Bible as the starting point. Now, they're working from an evolutionary starting point and building their framework. We're working from a biblical starting point to build our framework. Everybody has a bias. The question is, which is the best bias to be biased by? And the Bible gives us those solid answers. No matter what the numbers come out to be, we are clearly made in the image of God, and we're supposed to rule over the planet and have dominion over animals like the apes.
If you go to zoos like the local zoo here, the Cincinnati Zoo, there are often signs on these different ape exhibits just saying, hey, this is your family member. This is part of your family. Well, gorillas specifically, because that's one of the great apes that we have at the Cincinnati Zoo, the differences between the human genome and the gorilla genome were the maximum range, the upper estimate rather, was 27.3%. Like that's a massive amount of differences. And yet they would say we're closely related to gorillas. Humans are apes like them. So again, this is not consistent with the evolutionary worldview whatsoever. What they're finding isn't consistent, but it is exactly what we'd expect when we start with the history God has given us in his word.
And it seems like they might be suppressing this a bit because there's not enough time, even with billions of years, to have this many changes in the DNA. And so they've got to reduce the time scale somehow. So I think they're not excited about this because of that. Also because, as we mentioned earlier, this is an icon of evolution. You take it away, you take one of the main pillars for arguing for evolution, and also credibility. Like if they're wrong about the 1%, that kind of undermines their credibility in the whole evolutionary argument.
Yeah, so now we have to be willing to confront when we see those numbers. Like, have you seen that recent study in Nature? It says more like 15 plus. And the other big omission here is they left out the sex chromosomes, the XY chromosomes, doing these studies. So we add those back in, we're going to get to a number that's much bigger than 15%.
Yeah.
All right, moving up to Canada.
So for me, I love this, especially when they give the number. I just forgot because they said it's so fast. I don't know if they said 400,000. I think they said 400 million differences in the DNA language. Is that what you heard as well? 400 million?
Yeah, I didn't. I don't remember what they said on that. My brain registered really big, a really big number.
Yeah, I just want to Google to see how many letters are in the DNA code. Okay, it says 3.2 billion letters. Okay, so yeah, I guess the 400 million differences makes is the proper data. So again, for me, I love when it comes to data, when it comes to things that can help strengthen our faith, and when it comes to numbers, I love this because again, it should change the way how we address this topic. And what is cool is because the social media, all the internet researchers, since they're usually in the hands of people who are not, most of the times they're not necessarily godly people. We've seen in the last several years social media and internet research browsers being abused for the sake of whatever, politics, science, religion. It will usually benefit people, like you said, who are wealthy and who have some agenda. But I'm glad when I tried to Google, their Google AI actually implemented this latest research in their data already. So when I Google today, it says, yeah, actually, the difference between human and ape DNA is not 1 or 2% as previously thought. It's actually 14 to 15%. I was like, good job, because they're keeping up with the latest research results. So for me, I just like this segment. I don't want to watch the whole video because the rest of the videos deal with some Canadian dinosaur bones that was found. They're talking about Charles Darwin and things of that sort. Basically, this was only the 7 minutes I wanted to cover, because for me this was like, wow, I was excited. Maybe I'm one of those rare people that gets excited, but I was like, wow, this is important for Christians out there to find out, as well as atheists. That doesn't mean this video will change anyone's faith or lack of faith, but at least I hope people will start using this number as something more confident when they're walking with God, or people who are trying to use data against God and faith, maybe they can stop using that, say, okay, I'm sorry, I have to stand corrected based on the latest research. It's not as big of a deal as I used to think. Any final concluding thoughts on this video before we switch to moon landing and the shape of the Earth?
I just think that it's, what was I going to say? Now I lost it. So I think that as much as Christians sometimes tend to they fail to be open-minded about things that might seem to go against what the Bible says instead of like investigating it. I feel like evolution itself is like a religion in a lot of ways, and I think they're making a good point about kind of like it being buried to a degree, and how this goes against the narrative, because the evolutionary narrative has been, it's almost like a myth. It's like mythology at this point, in the mind of a normal person. Most people who aren't biblically grounded or have a biblical worldview, they just automatically accept the narrative about evolution as true. Like it's that's just the way it is. That's life. It's as real as jumping in a river and you're going to get wet, But I mean, obviously, like stuff like this shows that it's more complex than that. There's a lot more to the story of reality, physical reality, and it's not what they're telling us. It's not the simple narrative that the evolutionary science is telling us. So yeah, I would just say that this breaks that sort of narrative that to me is almost like a secular religion in itself. So yeah, that's another really good reason for this. Because even if you're not saying, well, this proves that evolution isn't true and the Bible's correct, maybe a better thing to say would be, see, this proves that your simple narrative of evolution isn't that simple, and it's more complex than what you think it is. So maybe we should have an open, critical mind about information in general, including the Bible. And let's try to discover reality without putting the other person in a box and dehumanizing them, which, to be honest, is what a lot of Christians happens to a lot of Christians. They get put into the box of, well, you're ridiculous if you don't believe evolution. And honestly, Christians kind of do the same thing with secular people when they say, oh, evolution is so ridiculous, because you don't believe the Bible, you're bad. It's like, well, no, like there's a lot of real information out there about science, about evolution that makes sense. And there's also a lot of information that doesn't make sense. Like, for example, those really complex organisms that have parts and pieces that function together, that it seems like impossible that those functions could have developed over millions of years through evolution. It looks like a created thing. It looks like someone thought, this is how I'm going to design this insect, and here's all the intricate pieces, and boom, I created it. That's God. So yeah, it's good for open-mindedness and critical analysis.
And I just want to say, by the end of this segment, that doesn't mean that we think that Christians who believe in evolution are dumb or stupid, right, or lost or going to hell. We're not. That's not the attitude of us here on the channel. If you believe in evolution, fine, believe it. Be that Christian or not Christian or non-Christian. I'm not persuaded by evolution, by organisms slightly changing and adapting to their environment. I perfectly see that as God-given ability to do that. But like from this to that, and then finally we have humans, I don't believe in that. But I don't call Christians who do believe in evolution and call it theistic evolution, as God-led evolution. I don't call them as lost or heretics or going to hell, nothing like that. I'm like, you're still my brother and sister, regardless if you're correct or not. So I thought that would be important for me to just, my heart is not against science. My heart is not against biology. My heart is to find out the truth and speak the truth. But with evolution as the whole thing, I will be against when it comes to the microevolution with microevolution. With microevolution, when it comes to the like I said, adaptation, I have no problems, because we see animals developing certain abilities over time. And again, I think this is what God has given to the species. Okay, now we're switching to Yeah, now we're switching to the second segment where we'll be listening to this 16-minute kind of interview that a Christian host had with three Christian astronomers who went to space, and they're sharing their experience with us.
To be honest, my first thought was, we're a long way from home. I hope this thing holds together.
Boy, is this fun. I'd watched Charlie Duke walk on the moon when I was a kid. How did I get here? How did I get to this point where I am the guy in this seat and all this is taking place?
One of the top highlights of the whole experience was doing spacewalks. The hardest thing we did physically and mentally, but the most rewarding too.
How can you believe in the Bible and science? I mean, don't you think that's kind of contradictory?
See, right there. Right there.
Set up the languages ministry at Answers in Genesis.
It's Charlie Duke. There were 9 missions to the moon. I worked on 5 of them. In 1978, I became a born-again Christian.
I came to faith in January 88. I was selected by NASA in 1996, and I flew 4 times NASA, once on the space shuttle going to the space station, and then 3 expeditions, each about 6 months long.
Many times I am introduced as an astronaut, but if I were to describe myself, I certainly wouldn't call myself an astronaut, because the way I see myself is as a wretched sinner that is saved by grace. Second from being a wretched sinner saved by grace, I consider myself a naval aviator.
Barry and I actually shared a time in space. His first flight, he launched on the space shuttle, STS-129, and I was on an expedition on the space station. So he brought me fresh food, and there you go. Yeah. So we had a great time.
We did. Yeah, he allowed us into his home because he was living there, of course, and we were just visiting. But yeah, it was a great experience.
Jeff, at one point, you had most days in space, and I had it here. It's over 500 days, correct?
Yeah, I think they say 534 days.
And now, Butch, you're getting up there. You're at 446 total days. But also, you just came back from, which is a lot of people know about this.
Gone longer than we planned?
Was it 286 days, they say, with the Starliner launch. So I have 3 very, interesting fellows in front of me with perspectives that a lot of us don't have. What is the wow moment?
The biggest wow for me is the grandeur of this place that we call home, which God created and uniquely provisioned for our habitation that we call Earth. And orbiting the Earth 16 times a day for a year and a half, and studying the surface of the Earth and taking in all of the details that you can see from that vantage point was the most spectacular part of the experience for me.
As soon as I got to space, the engines on the space shuttle cut off. We separate from the external tank. I feel the weightlessness for the first time. There's jets in the nose of the space shuttle that are blasting, orange blast right up in front of me. I can hear it like little explosions at my feet. Boom, boom. One of my crewmates levitates up from the middeck. He doesn't climb the ladder that's there. He just levitates up. I'd seen it on video, but I'd never seen it with my eyes. It was the strangest sight I'd ever seen, just kind of floating up from below. When the external tank separated, when the shuttle separated from the external tank, water droplets on the external tank came off and had turned to ice. And there were thousands of these ice crystals outside the window, with the sun behind us illuminating them. It looked like diamonds. And it was glistening diamonds, thousands of them outside the window, orange blast, boom, boom, boom. I'm feeling weightless. I'm still strapped in. My crewmates are levitating everywhere. And I was like, wow, Lord, how did I get here? How did I get to this point where I am the guy in this seat and all this is taking place? That was a pretty wild moment.
I think one of the most moving times of my flight, we'd gone into orbit around the moon, and we came around from the backside and we had Earthrise for the very first time. To be honest, my first thought was, we're a long way from home. I hope this thing holds together. But then the beauty of it hit. That vision of Earth is just a beautiful planet. You don't see any evidence of civilization. It's just that jewel just suspended in the blackness of space, vividly impressed in my mind still today.
General, when you say that, and I think, wow, that vantage point of our planet from the backside of coming around the backside of the moon There's only 24 individuals that experienced that, a total of 24 ever, and you were one of them. That's a special. That's very special. That is a gift the Lord gave you that not many people have had the opportunity to experience.
I can't say at that point I recalled Apollo 8, Christmas Eve television show. Bill Anders had taken this picture, and there was the Earth comes up, and they start reading from Genesis.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
I get back and I look in the scriptures, and it says, when God made the earth, he suspended it upon nothing. That's exactly what it looks like.
The three of you in the wow moments have not spoken about what most of everybody else.
Okay, I want to stop here because I'll probably forget if we continue watching for too long. Okay, first, I have to say that I'm blessed that our brothers went to space and they can speak from the first perspective, from their own experience, instead of just watching videos online, reading books about people you don't know. Now when you see people talking, all of them are born again, all of them serve God, all of them, one even exaggerates to the point of, like, I don't call myself an astronaut, I'm like a wretched sinner. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, you can still yourself, call yourself an astronaut. It's nothing wrong with how you see yourself spiritually, that's another thing. But it's not like you're not an astronaut. You don't work in a grocery store. But yeah, you have people like that who emphasize their wretched side of spiritual walk, which I do understand. Sometimes I see myself the same. But I just want to say that I appreciate our brothers. As we heard, only a few dozens of people in the history of humankind had the same privilege of being out there, walking on the moon, orbiting and seeing and experiencing what they experienced. And for people who may say, well, some of the videos came from Hollywood, studios, or some of the videos were altered. We've seen videos that are provided by our brothers and, well, I would say sisters. Who knows if they're Christian women working for NASA? There probably some are. But here we're talking about three people. One of them is a much older gentleman. You, as a Christian who would think this is false, this is fake, they sold out themselves. NASA forbade them from speaking the truth. They're not allowed to say this or that because of the threats or because they're bought. If you want to come with something like that, you also you're crossing the line between conspiracy and now having personal attacks when it comes to the moral and spiritual side of our brothers who live for Christ, proclaim the gospel. They're not ashamed of that. Yet you would come to the point, if you dare to say that this is false, you will have to say, well, no, actually you're lying and this is all fake. I don't believe these people. Then you will switch to the point of almost no return. Like, you would not see what they saw and they're sharing with us. You would actually believe your data that you found in the dark corners of the web.
Yeah.
And then for someone like that, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I will have to say there's no help for you unless God proves you in humility for your own sake that you're wrong, and you have to literally repent, which means change mind and think the opposite. If you would come against these brothers and say something that would attack them, that will go against their morality or their spiritual standing before God as liars, as deceivers, then it's not them who have any problems and issues. Then that's on you, who would come as accusers of the brethren. And that's the job of Satan. That should not be your job, especially without any evidence and data. For me, I'm blessed to be able to watch this and see this. And I'm just so, because I cannot go fly with them. I always imagine myself since I was a kid, something like a space cowboy, exploring the universe, flying among the stars. That's why I love universe. That's why I hope in the eschaton, in the final day, that God will enable us and allow us to have some space exploration. I don't know how that will go, but I would like to be something like a space cowboy, less of a cowboy, but more of a space exploration person. Why not? That seems way more interesting than just focusing on Earth. If you think that the dome is preventing us to explores this vast space, if you think that these brothers never landed on moon, if you think anything like that because of your twisting the Bible, again, trying to find sources with from the dark web and sources from the dark, sides of the internet, then I feel actually sad for you, because you're not just going against the Bible, you're not just going against the science, you're actually going against the personal eyewitness testimonies of our brothers. And that's a huge red flag, whoever you may be out there. Okay, Dain, your side.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I guess first off, you have to understand what's good data and what's bad data. Like if you're going to the dark corners of the web and you're just grabbing what appears to your common sense as good data or whatever, and you haven't been trained, and you haven't been through the process of understanding what it is to do actual research, what it is, there's a difference between I've done my research, which they say that, but they've really just went off on the internet, or I've done my research and you actually know how to do research. Like you actually know the methods of thinking that are proper or not proper. You know how to vet sources properly. Like all of these things that are wrapped up in that you learn when you're trained or when you seek that understanding. So especially to base an accusation on, I did my research and I got the information off the internet, that is horrible. That we shouldn't be doing that. On the flip side of that, you got someone like Megan Bashan, who wrote Shepherds for Sale. And in Shepherds for Sale, she talks about how the leadership of the evangelical church was captured by special interests during the last several decades. And this is why we've had an influx of progressive ideology pushed by the leadership, many people in the church. And I'm looking around and wondering, why are so many people believing things that are very damaging and against, really, I believe, against Scripture, modern culture war issues mostly. And so that makes me realize that people can be bought. When you realize what the intelligence services do to people or threaten people with, you understand that does happen and can happen, where people won't say certain things or whatever. But I don't think that applies in this case. I think there's so much public information. There's so much that an amateur person can do to validate the science around space travel and the universe, the ability for us to go to the moon. There's just so much information there that this idea that these normal guys, that yes, they're NASA astronauts, but they're in no big position of power or anything like that. I don't see that they have any reason to lie or cover up this. All of this stuff, you can, as an amateur, you can go out and build your own rocket if you wanted to. You'd probably die. But look at Elon Musk, So, I just really think it's ridiculous to kind of say that people like this are, bought out or lying or what have you. But at the same time, I do know certain people high up in, there's a certain individual, I won't say his name, but if he was the director of the National Institutes of Health during the pandemic. And he was one of those people that Megan Bashan referenced in Shepherds for Sale that was captured by special interests and pushed certain progressive ideology and the science that actually ended up killing and hurting a lot of people. I know that's a controversial position to take, but people can be compromised and people can lie. But I think that this is different. This is obviously like, if you're into science, you can validate the fact the Earth is round. You know how a rocket breaks the gravity and goes into space. You understand how all that stuff works, and it's publicly verifiable by really anyone if you're smart enough and willing to put the time in. So no, I don't think these guys are lying at all. I totally believe what they're saying.
Seriously, the easiest way to see that we don't live under a dome, we don't live under the firmament. Yes, we left space, and yes, there are human-made satellites as well as God-given, natural satellites around so many planets. Even Moon has its own. It's just to buy a decent telescope and look. What do you think when you see those planets and stars? Do you really think they're under the firmament? How big they're, or how small then they would be? So it takes more faith for people to believe there is this wall around Antarctica, that you're not allowed to go there. Newsflash, and we will cover this a whole episode on the Antarctic wall. When people say you're not allowed to go there, newsflash, there are cruises where you can pay. You can actually go to Antarctica. I've met people online who work for this for these cruise companies. But people would rather believe in something that is way harder to believe. Like, there are no planets, they're inside, there's water above us, you can't leave space, everything is empty. Dude, that would be boring. How much of moral majesty and glory God receives by creating a vast, countless space with trillions of galaxies and even more stars? Wouldn't that bring more glory and more beauty when you think about God as created than just one small planet? Everything is inside. It's small. It's flat. It's boring. It's like okay, what's a big deal? So people would rather believe in these things that are harder to believe. Just buy a telescope. Don't believe us. Don't believe NASA. Don't believe even Christian scientists and Christian astronauts. If you think they're compromised, buy yourself a telescope or go to a museum. Go and check yourself. Some museums have telescopes. Not every one of those have. But go in and check yourself. If seeing is believing, these should change your mind. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easily verifiable by anyone. It's just, and I don't know what it is. I think that, take the flat Earth thing. If you're someone who doesn't have any idea what to say when someone says, "Well, the Bible isn't true," and you have no idea how to respond to that, and then you watch some video that pulls up some verse in Job about how the Earth is flat, and you don't know how it works as far as how the Bible was written and things like that, you're going to latch onto that as see proof, and that seems amazing to you. So I get it. I kind of get it in some ways why people fall into those traps, but it's really unfortunate and sad, because all they would have to do is actually be curious about it and do a little bit more common sense thinking, and they would realize that that's completely ridiculous. It's not I think it's way easier for people just to believe that they are hiding it from us or something like that. And I'm not some guy that says, "Oh, conspiracy theorists are bad." No, not at all. I totally believe there are things in this world and that are being hidden, that there are things that people are trying to get away with for various different reasons, and there is such a thing as public propaganda. That's also verifiable. Our best lesson for that is the Soviet Union. We can look at what they did in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and we can understand how propaganda works. We know that the CIA went to journalists and had relationships with the journalists and fed them information to put out as propaganda. That's verifiable. But the key is, is it verifiable, and does it make sense? Are there facts to back it up? And I think it's just hard, because there are sometimes it is true that there's a conspiracy, and other times it's not. And people it's just easier. It's like intellectual laziness, basically, is just to say, "Oh, yeah, they're hiding the moon landing from us," or, "Oh, yeah, they're hiding the fact the Earth is flat." And then they just shut their brain off and they don't think about it any further. And that's to our shame as Christians, really. It makes us look ridiculous in the eyes of the world, and it damages our witness. So we need to start using our brains,
Yep.
I'm gonna get off my pulpit now.
Okay, let's continue watching 11 more minutes.
Speaks about when we ask an astronaut, we ask you about the stars and the way distant, and all three of you have given a lot of attention back on the Earth. I think that points again to the Earth is where those who are made in the image of God right now are those stewards, and the gospel, and Jesus came to this earth.
One of my favorite themes from Scripture. When we think about the works of God, we think about, of course, creation, and we think about redemption. We think about His provision in creation and His sustaining creation. But sometimes we forget about His work as governor and His work of providence.
I'll echo that. He's absolutely right. This amazing created globe that Isaiah tells us the Lord created to be inhabited, and you can tell it from space.
It's a demonstration of God's providential care for each of us.
Everywhere I go, General, I get asked the question: the moon landings never happened, right?
Some people say it's hard to believe that the moon landings were fake. I say it's hard to believe that they were real.
The moon landing, I just can't get behind it. I can't believe it happened.
There's a bunch of weird connected to the moon landing.
It's regrettable that people would think that 400,000 people and 400,000 people workforce that supported the moon program could all be in cahoots together and lie to the entire globe. But people believe that for some strange reason. Because I know you went. Of course, you know you went.
Yeah.
There's no way we would stand here together saying we believe in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and bold-faced lie to everybody.
And then everybody keeping that secret for 55 years, too.
Yeah, really. But, the evidence is also there. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the spacecraft is orbiting the moon and taking pictures. And they've taken pictures of every Apollo landing site. There it is. And I don't know how you can...
They say it's all a part of the conspiracy. That's part of it, too.
Charlie, I got to ask you a question. Describe what it's like to hop around on the moon in a heavy spacesuit at 1/6 gravity.
Down here with all my gear on, I weighed 363 pounds. But up on the moon, 60 pounds. So you had this bounciness.
Boy, is this fun.
But you had to bend over to keep your center of gravity over your feet, or you're going to tilt backwards or fall forward. It was easy once we got used to and how to move around the surface. And John and I had a rover, so we didn't walk very far, but we drove, I think, a total of 17 miles. I fell down a couple of times, one working on an experiment. So now I'm flat on my face on the moon, and John's off somewhere busy. So I started a series of push-ups, and I pushed and I rocked up on my feet, and I've got enough up to stand up.
How'd you like that? Beautiful maneuver there, Charlie.
I felt right at home on the moon. The beauty of the moon, of the rolling hills and the craters and the mountains, and the horizon was so clear. There's no atmosphere. So you look out and there's this break between the blackness of space and in the sky and then the gray of the moon. We were having so much fun. I didn't want to come back. And
sure.
Come on, Houston, give us 2 more hours. Get in the spacecraft, guys. Our last hour on the moon, it was moving for me. I had a picture of my family, and I took up this little photograph of my family and dropped it on the moon. I just thank God now, looking back at His providence and giving me that opportunity to land on the moon.
So the general term, everybody calls it spacewalk, but you're really, of the three of us, the only one that actually walked. Jeff and I we space handed on the space station. This is how we affected it.
One of the top highlights of the whole experience was doing spacewalks and to go outside. I mean, and to climb around the International Space Station, which is big as a football field. So going hand over hand and being outside for almost 7 hours. The hardest thing we did on space station flights, physically and mentally, but the most rewarding too.
So this flat Earth movement, right? That starts.
Okay, before we switch to the last segment, the flat Earth, I just want to, just briefly talk about him landing on the moon. I would say first we saw those original images, Second, we were seeing even video when one of the Christian astronauts were trying to, perform maintenance on the space station. You could see Earth behind it. You could see a globe. You could see everything. They were in space. It's not just your random Hollywood studio. But then also for people who would dare, especially Christian people who dare to attack some of these brothers, that person who walked on the moon decades ago, half a century ago, he's an older man. He will probably faster and sooner than many of us face Jesus. Do you think that he'll be lying about something like that before he dies? And even if you would say, well, why not? What would be his agenda? What would he benefit? He's already retired. He's already getting his money. He doesn't work for NASA anymore. He's going to face Jesus. I don't know when, but it doesn't look like in 50 or 100 years like he has a long life ahead of him. He's thanking God for everything. He's there telling people like, this is my experience. If we dare to discredit that by saying this is all fake, you were paid to lie, then we, like I said, we're getting in the shoes of Satan of attacking and bearing false testimony against our brothers. That man could be easily an elder in our church. That could be our brothers. I mean, that can be some of our brothers. That can be some of our fathers. That can be to some of us, even our grandfather. So imagine how would you feel if someone would come against your dad or your grandpa and call him a liar. Imagine your dad or grandpa went to one of the wars. Imagine your grandpa went to the Vietnam War and someone comes and says, no, man, you're a liar. You've never been there. I don't believe you. And then you say, no, we have uniform, we have photos, we have helmet, we have whatnot. No, that's all fabricated. I don't believe you. You're just a liar. How would that? Yeah. I mean, you can say, I don't care. You're just a stranger like I met on the street. But deep down in your heart, you'll be like, why are people disbelieving? Why are they attacking my grandpa? Like, why do we have to lie? Imagine like some of these people said 400,000 people were involved in the mission of landing on the moon. From cleaning people to the engineers, to the scientists, to the people dealing with computers, to mechanics, to astronauts, to all kinds of people. 400,000 people. If that was false, then Russia, the Soviet Union, China, all these other superpowers who would hate America back in the day, they will come and say, no, this is all Cold War propaganda. America is lying to you. They never landed. But they all backed up and said the same thing. Why would Russia and China work for American people to make sure that you believe the lie? Why? Because America bought them? Again, you have to believe in these lies and way bigger conspiracy theory just to admit, yeah, we went to moon. People walked on moon, period. Glory to God. Okay, your comment.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It defies common sense. I mean, it's a funny thing. Like money. So I want to be careful because now with this, I'm totally with you. Like I totally think it's ridiculous to think that the moon landing didn't happen or that the Earth is flat, obviously. But or the Holocaust. There's a commenter talking about how people believe the Holocaust was false, and I mean, there's so much evidence of that. It's just like ridiculous. But I just want to be careful because sometimes people will take this argument, like, so for example, J. Warner Wallace. You know who J. Warner Wallace is? Yeah, he's great. I love that guy. His books and stuff about using his detective skills to decide what is true or not with regard to the Christian faith are excellent. And it's more along the lines of the philosophical apologetics. It's very good. But one of the things that he says is about conspiracy theories is that it's really hard to keep a lie. And it's really hard to keep a lie amongst a great number of people, per your point about the 400 or so people working, or the person in the comments actually maybe made a comment about all the people working on the moon landing.
400,000 people.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that gets like impossible to keep secrets and things. But I do want to be careful because people, it is a real thing that people get threatened with being financially destroyed or having family members killed or financially destroyed. If they talk about certain things, you know, or just threatened with prison if you talk about certain things. So I want to make a delineation there, because some people will say, we'll just take that sort of idea that, how could 400,000 people keep a secret? And then they'll dismiss all conspiracy theories. And I think that it's important to still understand that people can be threatened, people can be pressured. And so that's a real thing, but you have to like use common sense. Like in this case with these guys, and again, I think it comes back to, are things verifiable, you know, or is there evidence? So like someone probably went and watched some YouTubes about the moon landing was false. They didn't go look at the actual evidence that it was real. And then they go and they accuse this grandpa who they don't know, who is a member of some church somewhere, who has a family, you know, who everyone in his family knows he went, and it's obviously true. And they're doing false witness against him based on some YouTube searches or something, right? So that's obviously a very foolish thing to do. And not only that, but it's sinful and wrong, because you are accusing someone of something, you know, of lying and everything. So I just want to make that sort of delineation. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Thanks for that. And now we'll be dealing with the last segment when it comes to the flat Earth.
Starting to gain popularity. I'm shocked that it's growing as much as it is, to be honest with you. Is the Earth spherical?
Of course it is. Of course it is. I first heard about the whole flat Earth movement when I was still on orbit in 2016, and I got some feedback from Mission Control through the comments from social media. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was satire, and it wasn't until I got back on the ground on the planet that I realized, I did a little bit more reading and realized, no, this is a new movement. And every place I go now speaking, I get questions. Typically not somebody saying they're a flat earther, but everybody knows a flat earther. There's no logic in the argument. So I gave up trying to answer logically the argument years ago. It's utter foolishness. That's all I can say. And frankly, it's becoming more concerning. I initially thought, well, maybe it's not a critical thing in terms of somebody's understanding of Scripture, but it is. If you can be caught up in that kind of system of belief, you've completely detached yourself from the truth of Scripture, and who knows where else you're going to go. So I think it's a very dangerous heretical line of thinking.
To me, you can look at the pictures we took and you can see the sphere. It's round, of course. There's no question when you look at those pictures that we took, it's a sphere. It's just not, it just can't, I don't know how you defend a flat Earth.
How can you believe in the Bible and science? I mean, don't you think that's kind of contradictory?
The true understanding of science is only understood through the biblical lens. And you can look at history. We call the age of science the time in the 1600s, 1700s or so, when you had names like Kepler before that, Isaac Newton, Boyle, Maxwell. All those guys were believers, and they were driven in their calling in scientific endeavor by their understanding of the Bible, and convinced that God provisioned in his creation in an ordered way. There was a mathematical order to it, a chemical order, a physical order. That makes science possible. Plus, we bear the image of God, who is the creator. In that way, we are creative. Right in Genesis 1, he says to Adam, subdue the earth, have dominion over it. Scientific endeavor, rightly understood, is just a component of subduing the provision that God put in his creation for our good and for his glory. If you look on the other side of the other thread of history, actually during that same period of time, you can look at the evolution of evolutionary thought, no pun intended, but go back and I call it the most successful propaganda campaign in modern history. There was nothing there based on science. You can go back 2 generations before Charles Darwin to his grandfather and see the development of what became known as Darwinian theory or theories of evolution. And then you had people that hated the church and the authority of the church at the time. Thomas Huxley and his group of friends. Huxley even acknowledged that there was no genuine science in Darwin's work.
When people talk about, well, Bible and science, they don't mesh, I would say, I'd point them to Matthew chapter 24, be not deceived, because that's just a deception of Satan, that they don't go together, because there's nothing. The Bible is absolutely true. It is inerrant. It is infallible. It is sufficient for everything we need. It is not a science book, but where it speaks to science, it's absolutely accurate, 100%. And to say that anything different is heretical, as Jeff alluded to. So with the exception of miracles, the Bible lines up 100% with physics, physical science. And that's a lie that so many, I even got a letter from a gentleman that said exactly that. Putting science and the Bible together, I just don't see how they go together. Well, they do, if you know the truth, and the truth is within the scriptures.
Science is proving more and more and more that life is not an accident. The understanding of the human genome and the helixes and all of that stuff, mathematically, it is impossible for that to happen by accident. I was a big evolutionist. That's what NASA taught me. The moon rock I picked up was 4 billion years old. In fact, they say it's the oldest rock on the earth now, that the one John and I picked up. Well, it might be the oldest, but it's not 4 billion years old. That's not what the Bible says. So I believe scripture.
And so I'm sorry to bring at the end this such philosophical, highly theological question. Do astronauts get to keep their spacesuits?
No.
Some of them get to keep their gloves that they like. I think maybe even Jeff has his Sokol, his Russian spacesuit gloves. I did not get to keep mine, but
Yeah, I think we can stop here because that's basically the ending. Okay, so a couple of things. First, they're dealing with the shape of the Earth, right? And they're saying like, well, while they were in space and came back home, later they found that some people, Christians and non-Christians, are spreading out this wild theory of the flat Earth, and they say that's not true. First, visually they experience that Earth is a globe. Second, they said it's your erroneous way of reading the Bible. And I just want to point something, Dain, to what you said in the beginning when we were talking for the first 1 hour about human versus ape DNA. I forgot to mention then, so I want to mention now. I agree with you, and you mentioned this not directly, but indirectly. You mentioned this many times. I think it's crucial for Christians to start learning how the Bible came to be, how the Bible was written. It wasn't some blind possession where people will be possessed and write down. There are also so many forms of speech included. Like you said, it was an ancient book, and ancient books that will be part of one whole encyclopedia of book that will be written to the ancient audience. So they knew the context, they knew their tradition, they knew their culture, they knew the surrounding myths, they knew the forms of speech. Like when I came to the States and when people told me something like, that's water under the bridge, I literally imagine in my head, water and bridge, until someone taught me that's actually form of speech for saying something about your past. That saying was not part of my culture, but that would be the same way if I would say something from my culture and translate literally and tell to my American friends. If I wouldn't explain what the saying means, they'll be confused or find it laughable. So in the same way, if we do this with cultures nowadays, if we don't apply the same logic and method of studying the Bible, then why are we surprised that so many people come up with these wild theories? Oh, the Bible mentions 4 corners. Oh, the Bible mentions the pillars of the earth. Oh, the Bible mentions Leviathan. Oh, the Bible mentions that stars are actually angels. Oh, the Bible mentions this. The Bible mentions this. It does, but not in the way that you think. So I think it should be almost crucial after getting to Jesus, being saved, going through some discipleship classes and books. I think it should be one of the most crucial things is not like preaching and teaching immediately, going to apologetics. First, learn how the Bible came to be. Learn that there are differences in the biblical manuscripts. learn that there are problems that even Christian scholars are trying to understand, like the ending of Mark 16, or similar examples, variations between manuscripts, how the Old Testament came to be, how the New Testament came to be, polemics, apologetics, Bible versus the myths. We cover a lot of these topics on the channel. This is episode 170. We did dedicate several episodes to the topics like this. I think it would be crucial if we would learn to understand the Bible is not science book. The Bible is not just that. The Bible is not always to be taken literally, even though it has literal theological and spiritual messages. Their cosmology, their worldview does not match ours. That doesn't mean it's false. It's simply written from a different era to different people that came before us. So now when you read it with the same attitude, like you would take a book written a few years ago, it simply doesn't make sense. So this is why so many Christians have problem dialoguing not just with other Christians, but dialoguing with atheists, because they don't know how to dialogue. They will just quote Bible verse many times out of the context. And this is why I like one of the Christian teachers and apologists. I just for a second forgot his name, but he mentioned this famously. Never read one Bible verse. Never read a Bible verse. Greg Kugel, something like that. That's his last name.
Oh,
he mentioned
Kugel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stand to
Yeah.
reason.
And I love that saying because it's so true. If you, let's say this is the book, I don't know, The Evolution of Adam. But let's say this was my biography or autobiography, or this was my love letter to a woman I love. And you just open any page, let's say, okay, 31. People do this with the Bible. I used to do this when I was a younger Christian. I would open a page and say, God, speak to me. And you open page to 31, and you're like, okay, I'll go to the middle of the page, and I'm going to read the first sentence. I won't pay attention to what says before that. I won't pay attention to what says after that. Boom. I was just reading today. This should encourage me. This should make me prophesy. This should help me think about my future. This should give me wisdom. It will not, because you learn nothing. You learn nothing. You can just go like that and just read, for example, Matthew 7, don't judge. But if you read a whole paragraph, that's not what the whole passage says. But you only read and can quote the first passage. And this is a problem in evangelical church that is so prevalent. I have friends who believe in so many weird theories, and I love them. But for the sake of brotherhood and peace, I try not to engage too deeply in the topics where we would disagree. Why? Because they never learn how the Bible came to be. And this is not me, I'm intellectual, I'm better than them. I'm not better than anyone. But if I spend time studying it, about a topic and they didn't, all we have is like, here's the quotation, usually from King James. Most of the people don't even dare to check other translations because they believe they're being corrupted. And they come to say, hey, this is what the Bible says. I don't care. Like if you dare to disagree, you're questioning God, you don't have real faith, you've been deceived. So this is why it's, like I'm saying, it should be fundamental and crucial and essential part of every Christian. I don't care what church you go to. I don't care how old are you. Unless you're 5, 6, 7 years old, then wait. But as soon as you get into your adult years, you should buy a couple of books, watch some videos, and learn how the Bible came to be. It's a very complex situation and scenario and process how we got the word. And human elements were so influential. So it's God's word, but it's also human word. So that's what I would say, how the Bible came to be, and also how people still, despite watching this video, despite seeing the footage, Christians, I don't even care now about atheists, what they would say, but I'm talking about religious people. They'll still come and say, this was altered, this was Photoshopped, people lied, all these Christians here, they're deceived. I don't believe what they're saying because my Bible tells me elsewhere. So what would be your thoughts? What would be your message to Christians like that? Not even non-Christians, but Christians.
Well, this is what really drives my my ministry or my organization that I'm launching, which is all about comparative religions and basically understanding the ancient context in which the Bible was written and helping train lay people in that. So not only just like how the Bible came to be, which is super important per your point, but being steeped in the ancient culture as much as possible to understand things like what you mentioned, idioms and things like water under the bridge. That's an idiom in our culture that you didn't understand because you came from a different culture. Understanding ancient idioms, understanding how things worked back then. What was everyday life like for an ancient person living in the Canaanite area? The more of that you get into you, and Heiser used to say, think like an Israelite. How do we think like an ancient person when we're reading the Bible? Lay people need to learn that as much as they need to learn how the Bible came to be. That's also very, very important. As is learning ancient history. Learning a little bit about the ancient language at least, or at least how to use tools to help you understand what's going on linguistically. These are all very important for not everyone maybe, but a vast majority of people to learn more about. And I think it's a gap in the church right now, is making this accessible to lay people, because frankly, it's daunting to learn a new language or how to use these tools. It's daunting to maybe learn about ancient cultures. It's daunting maybe just to take a class learning how the Bible came to be. But we need to make these things accessible to lay people so that they can have a foundation to think about. When they run across things like this, people need to learn how to think better about everything, including the Bible, So when you run across like flat earth, they should immediately understand that ancient people believed in a flat earth because that was their cosmology, and understand the concept of divine accommodation, and that's not what the Bible was trying to tell us, that it was a flat earth, but people don't have a clue. All they know is their favorite YouTube pastor said that the Bible says, and so it must be true, and so we can't listen to science because the Bible says it. If we're Christian, we got to believe the Bible. Well, yeah, but do you understand what the Bible even is? Do you really understand what it's even saying? No, it's not as simple as like pick a English version, whether it's KJV or NIV or whatever. It's not as simple as like pick your favorite version, read it, and think, this is what it must mean for me, or this is what it means. Like, no, it's way more complicated than that. And people need to be helped to make that process easier, I feel like. You shouldn't have to go to seminary or college to figure that out, right? Your pastor, your leaders in your church should be teaching other people how to think about these sorts of things. So, yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that comment. I think that was a good one. I was conversing with our friend Del Misterio and his proposal. Would I be interested in being interviewed for a Spanish-speaking audience? Well, potentially. First, I'm not a scholar. I usually try to invite people who know more than me in different topics so we can learn together. I'm not a scholar, even though I do have a bachelor's in theology. I don't speak Spanish. There will have to be probably a translator if that episode ever happens. Also, it cannot happen before mid of August because I'm going on vacation. So yeah, let's keep in touch and let's see what's what you have on your mind. And you can always comment under any YouTube video that we post that is going either pre-recorded or live, doesn't matter. And maybe we can exchange information and see what's happening. But yeah, I just wanted to say, when it comes to the concluding part of this episode, Dain, thank you for your time. I thought, honestly, because we were supposed to deal with 2 videos, I'm like, combine 20 minutes, maybe we can stretch this to 1 hour, maybe 75 minutes. I don't know how we got to 2 hours.
It's because I don't stop. It's because I don't shut up.
and I have this problem whenever I say we're going to be short, we're never short. And when my friends from church, or in general, when I share with so many friends, the podcast, they're like, oh man, your episodes are long. I'm like, it's like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like people enjoy talking. Also, there's so many rabbit trails. There's so many questions. Audience is conversing. They're asking questions. You can't just like it's not a marathon. Like, oh, I have to end up everything in like this race unless I suck. I have to finish in 15 minutes. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. But we had so much fun. We covered so many topics, so many. We did so many cross references, especially Dain did. I also want to say this Sunday I will have Pastor Ben coming back on the channel. We will be dissecting differences and parallels between Jesus and Superman. I don't know if that's a weird topic. I as a nerd, I love comic books and I love superheroes. I read the whole Kingdom Come, which is like 300 pages. Wonderful comic book that is deeply religious. So we'll be first talking about in general differences and similarities between Jesus and Superman. Then we'll be dissecting the religious parts of Kingdom Come, which is amazing comic book. It's only $11 currently on Amazon, and with extras and sketches, it has like 400 pages for $11. A new one? Are you kidding me? That's a good deal. So yeah, we'll be talking about that this Sunday evening with Pastor Ben. Then I'm going on vacation. Next episode live will be August 10 with I just got confirmation today from our friend Christian archaeologist Dr. David Graves. He'll be talking about some new finding about Pontius Pilate, and we'll see how long is that episode. He's elderly, he cannot talk for too much, so the episode may be only an hour or something like that, which is okay. Not every episode has to be 2 or 3 hours. So that's coming like I said, August 10. In the meantime, we have pre-recorded many episodes that will be broadcasted on Friday evenings and Sunday evenings, probably 6 or 7 p.m. Central Time, which is regular time that I go live. So yeah, we prepared a few of the episodes as a surprise. I've been working hard. I've been editing, recording a lot, not having much time. I still didn't start packing. I want to thank everyone for your love, for your kind comments. To be very vulnerable, I've been very discouraged with the podcast in the last 6 months because I lost dozens of subscribers. I don't know why. I would imagine if we cover archaeology, so they subscribe to archaeology, they only accept archaeological videos. Or people who come for supernatural, they may accept only supernatural, but we talk also about God and theology. Or when we talk about systematic or biblical theology and people subscribe, they also see fringe stuff. I just want to say this channel, even though it was primarily inspired by the work of the late Dr. Heiser, but it also comes from me being very curious by nature. I love learning about so many things. So this is not one of the channels where you have a niche, like, oh, we're just going to talk about botanics, nothing else. Well, maybe I like 25 other topics. So sorry, but I'm not sorry. But again, I've seen so many people leaving lately. A number of clicks is getting fewer, less subscribers, less comments, less views, to the point of I was even questioning myself, why am I paying to do this, and why am I sacrificing time from friends in church and rest, even to the point of like, should I maybe even quit and give up? So if it's on your heart, please subscribe, send some encouraging comment either through email or Facebook or YouTube, because I'm in the times where I need encouragement to keep continuing. I have 100 other topics I want to research and cover, but it's been very hard to feel like you're fighting against or going against the flow that is like, even your brothers and sisters won't support you. I don't even mean financially. I mean, they won't even watch and click and like. So that without that, YouTube, I think they even stopped promoting my channel. And without that, like, well, if YouTube is not promoting, then barely anyone is watching. So again, if it's on your heart, please subscribe, like, and send some encouraging comment, because it will mean a lot to me, especially because I see I invest a lot of time and energy, and I get only 100 part back, and that kind of sucks because I take this ministry seriously. Dain, thank you so much for your time. What will be your concluding thoughts when it comes to this episode, and in general, maybe some encouraging final message to the audience?
Well, I love talking about stuff like this, and I think people are scared to talk about certain topics that they may not agree with, or that may be sort of branded as heretical or bad. So for example, the moon landing is controversial, or the flat earth thing is controversial. And maybe like if you're a flat earther, you hear someone that believes it's a globe, you're not even going to want to talk to that person because you think it's bad. Or evolution is probably a better example, right? A lot of Christians aren't even willing to talk about the merits of evolution versus the merits of, the things about evolution that seem not true. And I don't take a position on that. I used to be anti-evolution, but after Swamidas and Heiser, I'm like, okay, I'm more open to it because it doesn't threaten my faith anymore. It used to threaten my faith because some YouTube pastor or someone told me that it was a threat to my faith. And then I got more data and I realized, oh, it's actually not a threat to my faith because there's different ways of looking at this. Another thing is local flood versus global flood. I used to think local flood, well, that disproves the faith. I can't go there. But actually, there's multiple ways of looking at these things. And I guess I would just say, as a Christian, try to go listen to Michael Heiser, first of all his content's out there, read his books. I think the person in the comments has made that recommendation a couple of times, and I agree with that. He did a lot of good for the church in this fact that he made it okay to investigate other ideas without losing your faith. And that's one of the biggest lessons I learned from him. And I would say that's what a lot of people need to understand is we should be able to talk about these things and not feel that it threatens our faith. And actually, when we do that, it strengthens our faith if we have the right perspective, So that'd be my recommendation is try to get past the fear of talking about views that you may have been told are heretical or will be faith destroying. Try to be more open-minded.
Okay, I forgot to unmute myself. So I just want to say thanks for watching us. Thanks for our brother Del Misterio. You can send me your email here before we go live. Before we stop going live, before we stop recording, or you can send your email through but just leaving a comment on YouTube, and once when I get it, you can delete if it's too personal. But blessings everyone. We shall see you in 2 days with Pastor Ben, and after that we'll be uploading several of the pre-recorded episodes because I really need to relax and see my family. That being said, Dain, may God bless you and your future project when it comes to what you reveal at the beginning of this episode. It's very exciting, so I hope you will share more information with us in the coming days, weeks and months. And because you're almost done with your masters, that's actually very encouraging to see, because not every person who is done with a biblical college or seminary has a platform to put their ideas and to use their passions. I know that I cannot wait to find either a job as a pastor or assistant pastor or a chaplain or a Christian teacher where I can be just enjoying doing things. And because I cannot do it, this podcast, this modest podcast, is the only platform where I can be heard, but not just me. It's not about me. It's where I can cover a lot of topics I care about and want to learn more with guests, and hopefully be a blessing to the global body, to the global church out there. So that's why I'm saying without that door being open, it actually sucks, because then your passions, your skills, your gifts are being put down, and you don't have any door open where you can feel like, I want to do something that matters. I want to contribute. I want to leave a spiritual legacy before I'm gone. And for you wanting to do this after seminary, it's wonderful. So may God bless you, and may God, just propel that project into a very fruitful ministry that will bless many.
We're all learning, like I view it as I'm learning in public. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I'll have a master's degree, but that's just the start, Like I'm learning in full view of the public is how I view it, kind of like what you're doing with the podcast. And I think that's what we should do more of. We should be willing to explore these things. And if someone benefits from that public learning, like what you're doing, there are people benefiting from this. You know, there are people learning from this, and you're learning from this. It starts with you learning, you know, and then doing that publicly, other people learn by watching you. And, you know, I think that's a good way to do it. And it encourages, I think, other people to do the same instead of just being quiet about their process. You know, what the heck? Put it out there. Be open-minded, you know, like learn in public and don't claim to be an expert, but, you know, maybe bring experts in or reference the work of experts. And later, if you change your mind, well, I learned something new now. I can have a different position because I grew. People want to see growth. It's good to see people growing. And I think we need more of that. We need more of that exploration in public. And we need less of everyone has to be quiet and we just elevate the expert, the so-called expert. You know, it's like those astronauts. They're experts in their craft of being an astronaut. They have certain degrees, but they're not experts in theology. They're not even experts in science across the board. They're just experts in their one area. So they're not really qualified to talk about X, Y, or Z that's not in their specific area, but that's okay. Everyone should have an opinion and be able to talk about things. You don't have to be an expert to talk about things, you know, otherwise no one's ever going to learn. We're just going to all sit here stagnated. So yeah, I think what you're doing with the podcast is really, really good. And I encourage you. I think you've grown a lot. You have grown the channel, even though you feel like it's stalled out maybe now. I think I would look back and be proud of your accomplishments because you have accomplished a lot. What a lot of people quit before they even got as far as you've gotten. So I think God will bless this. I appreciate it. You know, I'm thankful for it. And I totally support you in what you're doing. So I would say don't be discouraged. Realize that, you know, this is a good thing and you're doing a good thing here and people are learning from it. So anyways, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it. It's always a blast.
Thank you so much. May God bless you and may God bless all of you. See you in 2 days. Take care.